Today we're going to talk about a really powerful idea, one that kind of messes with our need to predict everything with numbers. It's a concept that helps explain everything, from huge financial crashes to, some of the most brilliant business comebacks. So, let's just dive right in.
So let's set the scene. It's August 2007. The whole global financial system is starting to groan and crack. And David Viniar, who's the CFO of Goldman Sachs, one of the biggest banks on the planet, he says this to the Financial Times. Now, to most of us, that just sounds like, boring financial jargon. But for anyone who gets statistics, this statement was absolutely mind-bogglingly absurd.
To get why it's so absurd, you have to see the actual probability of what he was talking about. It's this number. It's a decimal point followed by more than 130 zeros. I mean, it's a number so small, it's basically zero. For some perspective, right? Winning the lottery is a statistical miracle. This number makes winning the lottery look like a dead certainty.
Let me put it another way. An event this statistically rare shouldn't have happened even one time since the Big Bang. Not once. And yet, the CFO of one of the world's top banks was saying it was happening several days in a row. So you have to ask yourself, was this just the worst run of bad luck in the history of the cosmos? Or was something else, something much more fundamental, broken? Because here's the thing. Viniar wasn't describing some super unlikely event that happened within a good working model. No, what he was really admitting, in his own statistical language, was that their entire model of the world was wrong. The map they were using to navigate reality, it had no connection to the actual territory. Their models, these complex things designed to predict and tame the future, had just completely failed.
And this brings us right to the heart of what we're talking about today, radical uncertainty. Now, this is not the same thing as risk. Risk is what you get at a casino. You don't know if the roulette ball will land on red or black, but you know all the possible outcomes, and you know the exact probabilities. Radical uncertainty is totally different. It's a world of unknown unknowns, a world where the future is, fundamentally unknowable.
A really great way to get your head around this is to think about the difference between puzzles and mysteries. Puzzles are like a game of chess or a crossword. They have clear rules, and with enough data and computing power, they can be solved. Mysteries, on the other hand, they're messy. The rules are fuzzy, or maybe we don't even know them. They require human judgment and interpretation. You can't just calculate the answer to a mystery. You have to step back and ask, wait a minute, what is going on here?
Let me give you a classic, real-world example of a mystery that everyone thought was just a puzzle. The de Havilland Comet. Back in the early 1950s, this thing was the future, the first commercial jetliner, a marvel of engineering. And then, in 1954, two of them just fell apart in midair, for no reason anyone could figure out. The investigation eventually found the cause, metal fatigue, starting at the sharp corners of the plane's square windows. This wasn't a risk they had miscalculated. It was a fatal flaw no one had ever even thought to look for. It was a complete and total unknown unknown.
And this is exactly what the former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld was talking about with his famous unknown unknowns. But what's really fascinating is that the engineers at Boeing, who learned from the Comet disaster and started designing their planes with oval windows, they were using the term UNC-UNCs 50 years before Rumsfeld made it famous. They knew, deep in their bones, that they were dealing with mysteries, not just puzzles.
So this leads to a really big question, right? If our fancy mathematical models are bound to break down when things get really uncertain, what are we supposed to do? Are all our decisions just shots in the dark? Are we just being irrational when we try to plan for the future? Well, the answer is no. It just turns out we've been thinking about what it means to be rational in completely the wrong way.
For a long time, economists have pushed this idea of axiomatic rationality. Basically, the idea that humans are supposed to be perfect optimizing calculators. And in this view, when we don't act like a computer, we're told we're full of biases and we're failing. But there's a much better way to look at it, evolutionary rationality. This says, hey, humans are adaptive survivors. Our brains didn't evolve to solve equations, they evolved to navigate a messy, uncertain world. And those so-called biases, a lot of the time, they're actually brilliant shortcuts for making good enough decisions when you'll never have all the information.
And that leads to this huge shift in how you should approach problems. If you can't calculate the odds, you have to ask a better question. Instead of trying and failing to be a supercomputer, we should lean into what we humans do best. We build a coherent story, a narrative that makes sense of what's happening. It's about sense-making, not prediction.
Think about someone like Winston Churchill. He made tons of mistakes in his career, some of them absolute disasters. But his greatness as a leader during the war came from his almost uncanny ability to get the story right. to understand what was going on with the rise of Nazism and what Britain needed to do to survive, even when everything was uncertain. He didn't have a spreadsheet telling him the probabilities. He had a powerful narrative.
Or take the story of Steve Jobs coming back to Apple in 1997. The company was literally about to go bankrupt, and a business school professor asked him for his detailed 5-year strategic plan. Jobs didn't pull out a binder full of charts. He just said, "I'm going to wait for the next big thing." He was waiting for a coherent story to emerge from the chaos. That story turned out to be digital music, and the result was the iPod. He just asked, "What's going on here?" and it changed everything.
So this is really the most important shift you can make in your thinking. If you can't predict the one single future, then stop trying. It's a waste of time. Your goal should be to become robust, to create plans and make choices that are resilient, that can work out well in many different possible futures.
Okay, so what does that actually look like? Well, it means you stop trying to find the one single best path, and instead build strategies that are strong. It means you are constantly asking yourself, what's going on here, to build that narrative. And then you have to be totally willing to challenge that story when new facts come in. The goal is to make plans that can handle surprises, to value adaptability over everything else.
And you know, here's the most freeing idea in all of this. When you stop looking at the future like it's some puzzle you keep failing to solve, and you start building a life or a career or a company that's resilient, something incredible happens. Uncertainty stops being so scary. It changes from being a threat into the very thing that makes life interesting. It becomes a source of opportunity, of creativity, and even of delight.
Like Oscar Wilde once wrote, "It is the uncertainty that charms one. A mist makes things beautiful." So instead of trying to build perfect models that get rid of the mist, maybe the most rational thing we can do is just get better at navigating through it and appreciating the beauty and the possibility that it holds.